welcome my very special guest, Oleksandra Matviichuk, and she heads the Center for Civil Liberties. And Oleksandra is the 2022 Nobel Prize, Peace Prize winner, and that's for her excellent work in documenting human rights violations in Russian occupied territories in Ukraine. And I have to tell you, I'm really happy to be talking with you because I feel like we need to have a lot more conversations about understanding Ukraine for Ukraine because we get that Russian lens so often, and also what it means for Ukraine to build in solidarity with other communities. And you're the right person to think about. I've been thinking about interviewing you for a long time, and it's a pleasure for me. So I just want to get started before we get into all this heavy stuff. I know you spend so much of your time taking care of Ukraine and really being a um, bearing witness to the world. But I want to ask you, how are you doing, and who's taking care of you?
It's not easy question because we are in large scale war, and it's very difficult to be in large scale war because war ruined everything which we call normal life. The possibility to go to work, to meet with your friends, to hug your beloved ones, to have family dinner, it's disappeared, and you live in total uncertainty because you have no idea what will happen in the nearest several hours. But these dramatic times also provide us an opportunity to express the best in us, to be courageous, to fight for freedom, to take burden of responsibility, and to help each other.
Right, I hear that. And so, I really want to talk about your work as a documenter of war crimes and human rights violations. I know that your organization has documented more than 21,000 human rights violations since 2014 when Russia first invaded. And this is the work that, as of 2022, you were recognized with the Nobel Peace Prize. And I'm interested in back in 2014 why you decided that you decided to take on this very massive task. I just want to get into like the very beginning stages of how you prepared yourself to do this work.
We have to return to the roots of this war. This war started not in February 2022, but as you rightly mentioned, in February 2014. And this was a time when Ukraine obtained the chance for democratic transition after the collapse of the authoritarian regime due to Revolution of Dignity. And in order to stop us on this way, Russia invaded. During the Revolution of Dignity, I coordinated civil initiative Euromaidan SOS. We brought up thousands of ordinary people throughout the country, and we provide legal aid and other assistance to persecuted protesters. We work 24 hours per day, and every day hundreds and hundreds of people who were beaten, arrested, tortured, accused in fabricated criminal cases pass through our care. And when people in Ukraine won, an authoritarian regime collapsed, and Russian troops invaded Ukraine. For us, it was much more easier to send mobile groups to Crimea, to Lugansk, to Donetsk regions, because there were a lot of volunteers who want to help other people and to defend their rights. So we use this Euromaidan SOS mechanisms, and we start to document such horrible things like legal detention, sexual violence, torture, extrajudicial killings in occupied territories. And unfortunately, we are doing this for 10 years, and we still have no idea either we are in the end of the war, in the middle of the war, or just in the beginning of the war. What we know for sure, that if we will not be able to stop Putin in Ukraine, he will go further and will attack next nation.
So far, the organization, according to what I see here, you've all documented at least 21,000 cases of human rights violations. Do you suspect that it could be much more than that?
For current moment, we have 64,000 episodes in our Tribunal for Putin database. And this number is increasing because we faced with unprecedented number of war crimes. Let me explain. Russia uses war crimes as the methods of warfare. It's a way how Russia tried to win this war. Russian soldiers deliberately provide enormous pain and suffering to Ukrainian civilians in order to break people's resistance and occupy the country. So we have been documenting more than 64,000 episodes, but it's just the tip of iceberg.
Got you. And I'm curious about what's the toughest part of this work for you personally. And I'm looking at an interview that you did with The Guardian back in 2023, and you bring up the story of a woman who was in occupied territory, who was a pregnant woman who was severely beaten by Russia. And basically, she begged for them to stop, and they refused, obviously. And then she said that the captors, you said that the captors agreed to free this woman if she told a Russian journalist that she was a sniper and asked to sit in a pose that her pregnancy was hidden. And so you run into these types of stories every day, and I wonder, as a human being, how do you take care of yourself in order to continue to document these very difficult stories that I know is very traumatizing even for you to hear?
I remember this young woman. She told that she begged not to beat her because she waiting for a child, and she got a response that because you have pro-Ukrainian sympathy, which is normal because she's Ukrainian citizen, they told her that her child has no right to be born. And unfortunately, it's not only one such horrible story which we are documenting. And it's not easy, frankly speaking, because you can be a professional lawyer, you can have the good knowledge of international standards, you can have experience how to work with international mechanism, but first and foremost, we are all human beings. And this is very difficult to get used to such type of stories because frankly speaking, what we are doing, we are not just documenting violations of Geneva or Hague conventions, we are documenting human pain. And sometimes you have this feeling that this human pain burn you out.
Do you feel burned out at times doing this?
I have a friend, she is Ukrainian writer, and she told because like when you are in a war you are always up and down emotionally, and she told that when we are down we are not down, we are in emotional trenches, and we are here just to restore our energy and to continue our fight for freedom and for justice again.
I hear that. A lot of people, we're hearing genocide being used a lot in conflicts around the world. And you know about the case that South Africa brought forward to the ICC in regards to Gaza. Ukraine has not gotten the same traction as it comes to Russia's behavior in Ukraine. As far as I'm concerned, what Russia is committing in Ukraine and the occupied territories is in fact genocide. Why do you think that the West, particularly the United States, for example, officially has been so reluctant to to call what Russia is doing in these occupied territories as genocide?
I think that we all in a huge problem. I mean, we all people in a huge problem because we live in a world where international system of peace and security is collapsing before our eyes. And Russia's war against Ukraine, the horrible war in Middle East, the human rights crisis in Iran, this terrible, bloody, ongoing war in Syria. And I can mention Sudan, Nicaragua, Afghanistan, like other countries where people are suffering in this concrete moment, is possible because this system is not working properly. And the system can't protect people against authoritarianism and against aggressive wars. And that is why we all in this big problem. And we have to go to the roots. This system was established after the Second World War by victorious countries, and they provide for themselves irrational indulgences. Look, this Security Council is a club of several countries who rule in the world, who have veto power, and only these several countries. Nobody choosing them, and now because we are in an absurd situation that Russia invaded Ukraine and has this veto power, the whole work of Security Council is paralyzed. And I think that the main question for nowadays is how we people in 21st century will define the human beings, their lives, their freedoms, and their human dignity. And can we rely on the law, or does just brutal force matter? And returning to a question, I concentrated on Russian human rights crimes in Ukraine. But I know as a human rights defender that if you're fighting for justice, you have to fight for justice globally. And we have responsibility for everything which going on in the world, we as a human.
Yeah, so let's get right into that. I want to ask you about what it means to build for Ukraine to build solidarity with other oppressed groups, and that's been a point of contention for me as somebody who supports Ukraine, as somebody who lives in Ukraine, and I believe that there could be better relationships with activists in Ukraine that fight Russian abuses, but as well as what's going on in Gaza. And it has been tricky, but I've seen some of your tweets and I've seen you say things in support of what's going on with the people in Gaza. And I just want to ask you about why do you think that that 30,000 people who've been killed in Gaza pretty much is happening, and it's done in because the West, United States, my country, is supporting Benjamin Netanyahu. And do you have any thoughts about why this abuse is taking place there? Any your thoughts about what should be done?
As a lawyer, I understand that the problem is in this legal infrastructure because all lives matter, regardless of citizenship, ethnicity, religion, ideology, political views. But for example, when we speak about Ukraine, for 8 years, the world closed their eyes what's going on in Ukraine in occupied territories. And when you speak with people from other countries, they told when the war started in 2022. And we remind, no, sorry, this war started not in 2022. This war started in 2014. And this war is going on for 10 years. And you just not keep attention what happened in Ukraine for 8 years. So I can understand this horror of people who now fighting for their existence, for freedom, for democracy in different parts of the world, because we was in the same situation. But what I want to emphasize, the situation is even worse, which we expected, because before we thought that if you get attention, the situation will change for better. So our problems is only because the world closed their eyes. But look to Russian war against Ukraine. In 2022, the focus of the whole world was on Ukraine, and it's not stop Russia. So even with all attention, people are dying every day. And we can do nothing with it. So I think that if I will not be able to join our efforts and to start a cardinal reform of international system of peace and security, such fires like wars, unfortunately, will appear more and more frequently in different parts of the globe because the whole international system is faulty and sparks everywhere. And I will give you one good example, not from Ukraine, but from Syria. When large-scale war started, I got letter from Syrian human rights defenders. And let me remind that war in Syria is going on for years, and people are torturing, people subjected to sexual violence, to illegal detention. It's going on just now, but Syria is not in newspaper, Syria is not in news. So these brave Syrian human rights defenders wrote me a letter when large-scale war started. And they told me, we are with you. We know what the war is about. We know what is human suffering is about. Please tell us, what do you need in your fight for justice? We want to help you because your success will be our success. And for me, it was not just example of human rights defender solidarity. It was example of something. When you read this letter, you have this acute understanding, what does it mean to be a human? Because when we support each other, when we help each other in this moment, we are acutely aware, what does it mean to be a human?
Right, right. I'm curious too. There are a lot of people who follow me who are from the continent of Africa, and also people who are Palestinian, and since a lot of these people are very sympathetic to Ukraine, some of the feedback that I'm getting is that you're right that the war has been going on for since 2014. They Some of the people tell me that because Ukrainians are not Ukrainians, but Africans are black people, and Palestinians are not European. They're not white. Their bodies and their bloodshed doesn't even get the reaction. Their pain doesn't get the reaction of what took place in 2022. There is this. It took too long to happen, but in 2022, the international community responded with sanctions, with these very robust legal measures that are still not enough now, but they say that they got more, the Ukrainians, even in this instance, they got more than us. And it's not like they're blaming Ukraine. They're saying that Ukrainians are not doing, the Ukrainians um, got something that we did not get. Have you heard this similar type of reactions from people in the continent of Africa? And what do you think maybe Ukrainian activists like yourself can do to build better relationships, particularly with Africans and with people in Palestine?
I once again can repeat that I can understand this feeling because for 8 years, nobody paying attention to the war and to the human suffering in occupied territories. And I was in frustration for these 8 years because, as a human rights lawyer, I interviewed hundreds of people who survived Russian captivity. They told me how they were beaten, raped, smashed into wooden boxes, their fingers were cut, their nails were torn away, their nails were drilled. They were compelled to write with their own blood. One woman told me how her eye was dug out with a spoon. And we sent numerous reports to UN, to Council of Europe, to OSCE, to European Union, to all existing international and regional mechanisms. And nothing changed. Nobody paid attention. And this horror now multiplies after large-scale invasion for the whole territory of Ukraine with Russian rockets, illegal places of detention, and so on and so forth. So I can understand this feeling. But solution is to join efforts and to push this reform of international system because it's not working. And I don't rely on politicians because I know that politicians, they always have this temptation to avoid to solve global problems, like in illusion that these problems will vanish. But the truth is that problems are not vanish; they become just more and more serious. And when we have impunity in one part of the globe, this encourage others, authoritarian leaders in other parts of the globe, to do the same, because they got this message that you can invade countries, you can kill people, and you will have nothing. So I have no magic tool how to stop suffering, neither of Ukraine nor in Middle East, nor I have no simple solutions, but I know that it's our responsibility, and we can compete for attention, and we all failed, or we can unite our efforts and make a joint demands, because our demands are universal. For what we are fighting for, we are fighting for to get not just in declaration but in practice the implementation, the principle that life of each person matter.
Hmm.
This is
Yeah.
what we are fighting for. It's very simple.
I agree. So it must feel frustrating to you when people make the suggestion that maybe in order to stop this invasion, this occupation, this war that Russia has waged, that you should negotiate peace with Russia. And how do you respond to that when people say maybe you should cede your territory, and that that it's the Ukrainians that are not reasonable because they quote unquote can't win this war?
But we want peace. We want peace, and we are fighting for peace. We are fighting for a peaceful future for our children in this war which Russia started against Ukraine. People in Ukraine want peace much more than anyone else because it's us dying. But peace doesn't come when country which was invaded stop fighting. If we stop fighting, there will be no more us, because it will be occupation. Let me tell you what Russian occupation means. Russian occupation is not just changing one state flag to another. Russian occupation means torture, rape, enforced disappearances, denial of your identity, forcible adoption of your own children to Russian family, filtration camps, ban of Ukrainian language, ban of Ukrainian culture, and mass graves. This is Russian occupation. It's not peace, sorry. It's just another form of the war. And okay, probably politicians can discuss very cynical recipe how to get things done, but as a human, how we have a moral right to leave people alone for torture and death under Russian occupation? It's our neighbors, it's our friends, it's our relatives. They're people. We have to fight for them. It's not the war for Ukrainians, it's not just a war for territories. It's a war for people who live on these territories,
Hmm.
for their future.
Hmm.
And unfortunately, Russia don't want peace. Putin clearly declared his goal just recently when this called false election happened in Russia. He told once again that we fulfill all our goals, and he openly said that Ukrainians are not exist, that we are the same nation as Russians. So we have a choice, rather either to be re-educated as Russians or killed. And this is not a choice which we
Yeah,
want
I
to
have two
have.
more questions for you because I know that you're short on time. I know it also has to frustrate you when people talk about the 2014 Maidan, which you are a very critical, instrumental part of. That they said that this was a CIA coup, and that it was the West who created this situation to have a conflict with Russia, as opposed to Ukrainians having their own agency about the destiny of their own country. What do you say to those people who say it was not Ukrainians who led this Maidan, but that it was a CIA Western coup? I know it has to frustrate you.
I know that this is a Russian narratives because they don't believe in people. All authoritarian regimes don't believe in people. They always think that it's something behind people. That because people, from their point of view, have no
A lot of people in the
subjectivity.
West think this way too. This Russian narrative.
What do I mean? I mean that ordinary people have a much greater impact than they can even imagine. Ordinary people can peacefully protest it, only just for a chance to build the country which they want. And this is normal, because people can change the history. And autocrats don't understand the power of people, because they denied people in their freedom and their rights. And they see people only just object of their control. They have another way of thinking. So people in Ukraine made their democratic choice 10 years ago, regardless of what Russia was thinking about it, what West was thinking about it, or someone else thinking about it. It's our choice. We made it.
Yeah, I hear you. Just talk to me about how you feel, how far Ukraine has come as a society since 2014, because your organization was founded in 2007, you know. And I just want you to speak to the optimism that you feel for Ukraine, because I know that you also have a lot of it's a democracy and people have the right to critique their government. And I know that your organization, you yourself, also are constantly striving for Ukraine to be better. But just tell the people how Ukraine has become better over these past 10 years, and what are your hopes for your country?
Thank you. It's a good question to end the conversation, and probably I will share our experience because for these 10 years, people in Ukraine are fighting with enormous opposing power. First, we was fighting against our own autocrat regime, just to a chance to build a country where the rights of everybody are protected, government is accountable, judiciary is independent, and police do not beat students who are peacefully demonstrating. And we paid the highest price for this chance because authoritarian regime gunning down more than 100 peaceful protesters. And now in this war with Russia, we are fighting for a right to have a democratic choice as a such. So, what I want to say at the end of our conversation, not just people in Ukraine, but people in different countries of the world now fighting for freedom and for their human dignity. And very often they are fighting in the circumstances when their efforts may seem have no senses because they face with enormous opposing power. But the truth is that we have to continue our fight honestly. Even when we have only our own words and our own position, it's not so little, we have to use them. And the result, even unexpectedly, will be achieved.
Oleksandra, pleasure and an honor. Thank you so much for taking time. And I support the country. I love Ukraine, and I'm happy that I have people like you to speak truth to power. And I'm happy to have interviewed you, and hopefully I can meet you when I'm in Kyiv, when I'm there next month. But thank you so much, and Slava Ukraina, and I wish you
Thank you.
all. I wish you well.
Героям слава. Thank you.